Good morning. Welcome. We begin our service each week by singing an invitation to gather together, even as we are scattered in many different places. Please remain muted as we sing Enter, Rejoice, and zoom in.
Enter, rejoice, and zoom in. Enter, rejoice, and zoom in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and zoom in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and zoom in.
I'm Laura Anderson, and it is my pleasure to serve as this morning's worship associate for the service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Charlotte County, also known as UUFCC. The service is being broadcast live via Zoom and YouTube. I wish to express my gratitude this morning to all those supporting the technology: Corey, Tom, Sue, Sharon G. Also, I offer a big thank you to Jim, Linda, and the members of the UUFCC choir for this morning's music. I would also like to welcome Sharon Whitehill, who will give this morning's sermon. I'd like to remind you of a couple of simple procedures that will help our broadcast run smoothly. To respect and protect everyone's privacy, it will be our practice to use only first names and, when helpful, last initials. Please remain muted throughout the service, even when singing, but please do sing. You may wish to have a chalice or candle available for our chalice lighting ritual. During the service, the Zoom chat function will be disabled. At the end of the service, we will virtually gather for a social time, but we will ask you to remain muted until you see a posting that invites you to begin. Your patience will be appreciated as we need a moment or two to close down the YouTube connection. The social time is via Zoom only. There's a lot of procedures and a lot of gratitude. This part is a welcome to you. You are welcome here if you believe in the teachings of Jesus or Buddha. You are welcome if you practice paganism or earth-centered spirituality. You are welcome if you call your connection to everything Spirit of life, or God, or the mystery of the universe. We believe that all are sacred and worthy. It is good that we gather together this morning. If you are new here or you would like to learn more about our fellowship, you can email Mary Jane at office@uufcc.org. Visit our website at uufcc.org. We are glad that you are with us this morning. The chalice lighting words this morning are by A. Powell Davies, activist and UU minister serving the All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. from 1943 to 1957. What are we, any of us, but strangers and sojourners, forlornly wandering through the nighttime, until we draw together and find the meaning of our lives in one another, dissolving our fears in each other's courage, making music together, and lighting torches to guide us through the dark. May the light we kindle in our time together guide us once again through the dark and into the bright dawn of courage. As Bryce lights the chalice here in the sanctuary, please join me in the recitation of our affirmation. I will pause after each phrase in case you don't know or don't remember the words. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace. to seek truth and love, and to help one another. I invite you to light your home chalices or candles. Thank you, Bryce. This morning's opening words are by Abhijit Naskar, a neuroscientist from Calcutta, whose contributions have helped the world tackle the issues of mental illness, prejudice, hate, extremism, discrimination, and segregation. Differences are healthy. There lies the scope for inquiry, and in inquiry lies the scope for learning. Differences turn unhealthy only when we make them the cause for hatred. In our tradition, we revere the living of our lives as a sacred endeavor, believing that the joys and sorrows we experience hallow the living of our days. We have a long tradition at UUFCC of sharing our joys, sorrows, and life milestones by entering them in the Book of Life. While we are meeting virtually, you may email your joys, sorrows, and personal milestones to bookoflife@uufcc.org. Messages should be sent no later than the Saturday prior to the service. During the Sunday morning service, the worship associate will read your words. Your message will then be entered into this actual Book of Life that's here at the fellowship. I have not received any messages this week, but I know there are joys and sorrows in your lives and the lives of your friends and family, others here at UUFCC. I know there are people who are taking care of children and spouses and parents. I know there are people who are aching in their hearts and bodies. May we hold all these and one another in love and tenderness so that this fellowship may be a source of strength and comfort, courage and hope in the days and weeks ahead. We will share a moment of silence followed by Spirit of Life.
Good morning. As most of you know, I'm a great lover of language and words, but there's a trap I fall into more often than I like to admit. It's the trap of the self-satisfied talker. I am so much better at talking than at listening. I'm so much more attentive to what comes out of my mouth than to what comes into my ears. Now, I know I'm not alone. I'm sure of that. I suspect many of you would admit to the same tendency in many cases. It's easy, isn't it? Too easy to become so engaged that you reach the point that your primary focus is on what you are going to say next, rather than to what you're hearing. You're not really listening. You're just waiting for your turn. That's especially true when you have expertise in a subject. And add to that, when you have very strong feelings about whatever the topic is. Now turn that around for a minute. Who hasn't also experienced that situation from the other side? Here you'd hope to exchange some ideas and opinions, and instead the other person just takes over and inundates you with his or her own point of view. So here's the thing. Someone can be a brilliant talker, but to be a good listener requires a very different set of skills. We know that. So why is it so hard to put into practice? I found that it requires not just different skills to listen well, but a different mindset also. When I was training to facilitate the Happiness is an Inside Job class, I acquired that mindset and I learned those skills. But still, in everyday life, I only sometimes remember to use them. Even now, all too often, I fall into the Sharon the blabbermouth mode, as opposed to listening as well as I could. Really taking in what it is that the other person is saying and responding to that. All that may be why I so admire a really good listener when I meet one. Reverend Amy was one of them. And I see another good listener in Reverend Kathy. Maybe acquiring that skill was part of their training for the ministry, though it's certainly true that not every minister demonstrates it. But these two, Reverend Amy and Reverend Kathy, they each have a way of rephrasing a doubt or complaint in words that validate what you say, and at the same time, suggesting a more positive way to express it. That's so satisfying to be heard and understood in that way. They let you know they get what you mean, and then they help you reframe it so it sounds really good. I'll expand on this in a minute, but first let me digress to some typical ways that most people respond to statements that challenge or offend them. Picture yourself with certain family members, or a neighbor, or even something you hear from the person behind you in line at Publix. Someone you feel you need to set straight. How well does that work? Your inclination to contradict or correct another person. Do voices get loud? Do accusations fly back and forth? And even if not, when you fight fire with fire, everyone is likely to go away feeling angry and resentful and upset. I've learned this the hard way, that fighting fire with fire, fighting anger with anger, just doesn't pay. Fighting fire with fire. That word alone should alarm you. Fighting the fire of people's fear-based beliefs with the fire of your hard-headed science or contrary facts, that only serves to entrench other people more deeply in their resistance. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. And it's so common a phenomenon that it's even been given a name. It's called the backfire effect. You may have heard of it, the backfire effect. So what else can you do? Not just in the world out there, but up close and personal in your own midst with family and neighbors, people in Publix. What can you do to break down the barriers that put us at opposite cultural poles from half, it seems, the American population? It's a huge question. And it brings me back to the listening skills of people like Reverend Amy and Reverend Kathy. If you attended that first town hall we held on Zoom at the end of August, you'll remember the moment when a couple of people expressed their dismay at the unfair treatment they believed Reverend Dan received at our hands. Those were very discomforting moments, discomforting emotional moments. But did you notice also the graceful and caring way that Reverend Kathy responded? The very first thing she did was to acknowledge the person's courage in speaking his truth. She named it as courage, and she commended it. Next, she reassured the person that he wasn't alone in his distress. That's always a comforting message, that you're not alone. Only then did she gently offer the thought that his negative metaphor, he had used the phrase witch hunt, that metaphor was really not very helpful. So she redirected the focus to what would help. After all, the purpose of this town hall, working together to communicate more effectively and allow time to heal. Now, this was all very understated, very quietly done. It didn't take very long, but it was a critical moment, and it left me in awe. I noticed that Reverend Kathy's response overall was, first of all, she did not comment on the grievance itself, the treatment of Reverend Dan. What she addressed was the emotion underneath the grievance, the anger and the pain that had prompted those critical words in the first place. In other words, rather than focus on the content of the member's complaint, she found her way beneath it to what really matters most, his feelings about it. If you weren't there, try to imagine what that was like for those who did attend. After Kathy's response, I felt relief. I had an image of all of us as a herd of wild ponies milling around, rebellious and separate, just minutes ago, and now suddenly gathered together and safely corralled. This is how community works, Reverend Kathy said, when it works well. This is community at its healthy best. We don't have to agree, but we listen and care. This is the way for all of our differences that we move forward together. That felt so good to hear. In the days since that town hall, I've thought a lot about how much soul searching this congregation has done lately, and how much we have yet to do, and how maybe turning inward, as we've had to do, has allowed us a kind of distraction from the troubled world out there. The pandemic, the relentless and overwhelming social conflicts and political divisions in the news every day. And I think it's been bad for our spiritual health. I know I'm constantly having to fight the temptation to betray my UU commitment to the dignity and worth of all people by judging and dehumanizing those on the other side. Far too often, it taints my whole outlook. So again, what to do, especially given the backfire effect? Now that we know that offering facts only increases the proportion of people who believe misinformation, is there no hope ever of coming together on the issues that polarize us? I'll take vaccine fears as a for instance. I've just been reading myself that the effectiveness of the COVID vaccine is being questioned even on holistic health websites. It's maddening, isn't it? Especially knowing that statistics and science will only cement the doubts and untruths that already exist, which in turn leads us to lose sight of the human dignity and worth we espouse, to label these vaccine doubters ignorant, thoughtless, selfish, stupid. I want to suggest a different model for us: empathic listening, the way Reverend Kathy responded to the dissent at the town hall, the way she made a milling herd of wild ponies into a unit again, and the way she engaged us all in seeking a mutual goal. Remember, first, she listened. She heard the dissenter out before ever speaking herself. Then she validated his fear that an injustice was done to Reverend Dan. She honored the pain he felt, his anger and hurt. And not least of all, she reframed the exchange in two ways: by finding the positive in it, that he had spoken his truth, and by including the rest of us in that reframing, reminding us that we can disagree with each other, we can see the same situation from vastly different perspectives, and we can still be okay. Hooray for us, I wanted to cheer. Later, I asked Reverend Kathy, how do you do that? She was modest, as you'd expect, but she did reflect on some things that she's learned and internalized over the years, which I'll share with you now. One was a rule she used to help stay non-anxious herself in anxiety-producing situations. Only one person at a time gets to be angry here. Only one person at a time gets to be angry. The corollary to that, she said, is reminding herself, the calmer I am, the better for everyone, including me. Her second trick was acquiring a simple verbal habit. I think it would behoove us all to adopt that habit. Instead of responding, yes, but, as we so often do, answer instead with, yes, and don't say yes, but say yes, and. Couldn't the rest of us learn to do some of these things? It sounds easy. I'm sure we'd have to practice. I can imagine a series of training workshops where we'd role play these listening strategies and others over and over again until we've kind of reprogrammed ourselves on how to respond. I think that's what it would take. We should also have refresher meetings from time to time to keep sharp. I picture myself starting this practice with Mark, my computer savior, who I recently learned has no plans to be vaccinated for COVID. When he started listing his reasons, instead of listening like Reverend Kathy or Reverend Amy, my mind glazed over. I was just waiting to escape, tuning him out. So much for that kind of listening that I'm talking about. So now I have to be honest with you and with myself. Do I really have the time and the patience to engage in this kind of empathic listening? Patience, yes, and also time. Well, maybe not standing there with my computer already stressed out about how much it will cost. And maybe not with a person I want to keep as a service provider. But if I had engaged Mark, if I had tried the empathic listening approach, what would have happened? If I'd listened better to why he resists the vaccine, maybe I could agree that the vaccines, it's true, they haven't been tested over the long term. Or I could agree, maybe, well, no, I don't trust pharmaceutical companies either so much. Maybe we could have found then some common ground without my having to change my choice of vaccination as the best solution for everyone. I could still disagree with his choice. And after that, we might actually have a real conversation. Like, how does he see the relative risks of vaccines in general compared to COVID? What does he want overall for his family, for the country, for the world? Well, to be healthy and safe, to be free from coercion, to be respected, of course. Who doesn't want that? That discussion with Mark will probably never happen. But I want to wrap up today with some real life, actual examples of this empathic approach. One is from an emergency physician and professor at Brown University, Dr. Jay Baruch, who says he stops feeling angry when he considers the lives of so many of his patients. Many of them are hardworking, loving individuals, he says, struggling to catch a break in a life that hasn't been fair. They're unmoored. They don't know what to believe in a life in a culture where truth itself has supply chain problems and where the healthcare system has been letting them down for years. A second, more dramatic example of this kind, how empathic listening can work and how it can work over time, is from Daryl Davies, a Black man, a musician, the child of foreign diplomats who attended integrated schools until he was 10. And that's when he had his first experience of racism. It was as a Cub Scout, and he was marching in a parade carrying the American flag and found himself pelted with bottles and pop cans and rocks and debris. It was inconceivable to me, he says now, that someone who never laid eyes on me could hate me for no reason other than the color of my skin. He pondered this for years and years. And finally, he decided that the best person to answer that question that wouldn't let go of him, the best person would be someone active in the Ku Klux Klan. No less a figure, in fact, than Roger Kelly, the imperial wizard of the national organization. No, don't mess with that guy, people told him. He'll kill you as soon as look at you. But Davies went ahead. He had his secretary arrange a meeting with Roger Kelly in a motel room. It was Davies, his secretary, Mary, Roger Kelly, who didn't know until that moment of meeting that Davis was Black, and Kelly's bodyguard wearing a sidearm on his hip. At the first sight of each other, the latter two men, the bodyguard and Roger Kelly, froze in surprise. A Black man. But they shook hands and sat down to talk. Although Kelly made a point of saying that he did see Davis as his inferior, not as an equal. They found that they agreed on some things and disagreed on others. But after an hour or so, there was a sudden crash in the room. Everyone jumped. Both men came up out of their chairs, eye to eye, ready to fight, each of them wondering if this was a trap. Until the secretary, Mary, started to laugh. She realized that the ice in the bucket of soda pop that she had gotten ready had melted, and the soda cans had all come crashing down. Well, everyone calmed down and talking resumed, but Davies tells this part of the story to illustrate how ignorance breeds fear. They were ignorant of what caused the crash, and so both of them leapt up in fear, and how fear leads to violence, in this case, potential violence, which was not acted on. Well, over the years, the two men continued to meet many, many, many more times and talk. They became friends. Davies even attended a couple of KKK meetings with Roger Kelly, who said, "This is my very best friend." Kelly finally quit the Klan. And when he did, he donated his cloak and hood to his friend, Darrell Davies. Notice that in both of these stories, the listening comes first. Lots and lots of listening. Years of listening in the KKK example. First and foremost, Davies listened, even to a sworn enemy who might have killed him. Yes, they disagreed on key things, but in the end, they reframed their connection, their encounters, as a friendship. My third and final example of empathic listening is a very personal touchstone for me. It's about the men's weekly coffee group that my husband, Jim, organized with others from this fellowship, which continued even after the pandemic when they met in a park by the harbor. My sister and I also met nearby in the same morning in the same park. And both of us noticed this van in the parking lot, not just flying Trump flags, but plastered with really nasty, ugly messages about liberals and Biden. I'm sure you've seen them yourself around town. Well, imagine my surprise when Jim told me that the man who drove that van had begun sitting in on their coffee group every week. What? Why? I was just outraged. I hope you told him to clean up that van, I said. But Jim just smiled in his own twinkly way, and the meetings continued, van and all. Later, only a few days after Jim died, Robert Moran came back from the men's group with a handwritten note for me from the man with the terrible van. I'm going to read it to you, word for word. "May I say how sorry I am for your loss," it began. "My name is Alan, and I'm homeless. I live in my van, but every Tuesday morning I'd meet the guys for coffee and talk. I don't have the knowledge of the other guys in the group, but Jim always made me feel like one of them. May I please say that to me, Jim was such a beautiful man. I will miss him so much. Me too, Alan. I miss him too. Today, I will leave you with this. Why not be curious about people whose views you don't share? The way Jim was about Alan, the way Daryl Davies was about Roger Kelly. I can't imagine a barrier any greater than the KKK, but Davies found a way past it. And so eventually did Roger Kelly himself. Again, why not be interested in what you can learn about people's sometimes hidden humanity? I'm trying to make that my goal, to quell my impatience and listen, to replace my yes, but with yes, and to let the other person be the angry one this time, to pass over the distorted facts they offer and respond to the feelings beneath them. That will go against every grain of my lifetime habit of talk. But my last words today are heartfelt. So may it be. So may it be.
In our tradition, congregations exist because of the generous support of members and friends. It is our privilege and our responsibility to ensure the health and future of this fellowship. To this end, your offerings to support the ministry of this fellowship, whether by pledge or donation, may be offered online. There are several ways you can give. You can mail checks to the office, drop them in our mailbox, or call the office to make other arrangements. We are also equipped to accept donations through the Venmo app. Payments through this app should be made to UUFCC offering. Your generosity is always appreciated. If you are with us for the first time, do not feel obligated to give. Today, you are our guest. Now it is time to highlight UUFCC's events and activities coming up. Please remember to read your weekly update, your weekly copy of the update, which includes a calendar and links for connecting via Zoom and some events in person. The updates provide a very important means for staying connected during these challenging times. Additionally, if you would like to have fellowship events highlighted during the service, you can email the worship associates at bookoflife@uufcc.org. This morning, I have 3 announcements. Fred Parmenter is looking for someone to help gather material for the newsletter. It would require only about an hour or 2 once a month. If you think you could help, even if only for a few months, please contact him via his email or leave a message at the office. Thank you. At noon today, on this same worship Zoom link, the Immigration Justice Committee will show the award-winning documentary, Lumpkin, Georgia. The film is 40 minutes and discussion and call to action will follow the showing. The film is about a private immigration detention center, one immigrant's experience, and the people in the small town of Lumpkin, Georgia. Additionally, after the service, there is a group of people who are discussing organizing a pagan earth-centered group here at the fellowship and also planning a Samhain celebration. If you're interested in joining this group, send an email to directors@uufcc.org or call Lori Douglas. They have the link for the Zoom meeting. Our closing words this morning are from Reverend Elizabeth Lerner McClay, minister of First Unitarian Church of Providence, Rhode Island. As drops of rain that find each other and build to become a track, a rivulet, a stream, a river, a sea, so are we drawn together. So are we fortunate to find each other. So are we bound together on the shared passage toward an unknown ocean in eternity. And now please join me in our traditional recitation as Bryce extinguishes the chalice. Again, I will pause in case you don't know or don't remember the words. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of hope, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of love, or the warmth of community. May these ideals shine in our lives and warm our hearts until we are together again. Go now in peace. And remember Sharon's wise words to be better listeners. Following our musical selection, those who would like are invited to stay for our social time. We'll let you know as soon as the technology is ready for conversation.
Go now in peace, go